And now, it's The Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law. Now, here's Sterling Fox.
Well, good morning and welcome to The Law Show. Nice to have you with us. We're talking personal injury law on the program today, and we have two lawyers in studio from Murphy Battista, LLP. A real pleasure to welcome Scott Stanley back to The Law Show. Haven't seen you for a few months. Hello there.
Hi, Sterling. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you back, and please introduce the newest member of Murphy Battista to our listeners, Scott.
Well, with me here is Bill Dick, who's joined the firm about a month ago. And he and I were partners previously at another firm, and we've got the band back together, so to speak.
Well, good morning and welcome, Bill.
All right, thank you.
Now,
Glad to be here.
You're an Okanagan-based guy, so does this mean that you've moved back to Vancouver to join Murphy Battista, or is the reverse true? Murphy Battista has just moved to the Okanagan.
Essentially, it's a reverse takeover of the province, so I've made Murphy Battista come to the Okanagan.
Okay. But now you and Scott have worked together in the past. So, Scott, back us up a little bit here, and because we want to know about Murphy Battista, and I want to talk to both of you, and you and I have done this in the past, as to why you chose personal injury law. But the two of you have worked together in the past, and you weren't involved in personal injury law in those days. You were working for the other side of the street.
You know, I think it's like Harry Potter. I think the wand finds the wizard. You know,
I see.
You know, Bill and I both started doing...
Guess what movie we got for our Christmas present?
Yeah, caught up with the kids.
That's right.
You know, Bill and I were partners at Guild, a really good law firm in Vancouver. Actually, Bill hired me, and I suppose I've returned the favor. And we did insurance defense work, defended personal injury claims, and, you know, I think we're reasonably content at it. But what we would do in our noon hours is we'd walk around the seawall and ponder about how we might make the firm better, make our lives as lawyers better. And I don't know how many circles we walked, how many miles of circles we walked, not really coming up with an answer. And
but nonetheless, being kind of keen on going somewhere, taking all of this somewhere, having some kind of positive outcome.
Yeah, and you know, doing defense work was, I think we were content with it, but we weren't. I don't think we realized how much we were missing out until we started to do personal injury work. And when we did, we eventually both would leave that firm and go do personal injury work elsewhere, and we realized it's just so much better.
Right.
So much better.
Now, who started doing the personal injury work first? You were working together doing defense for insurance companies. Who left first, and who started doing personal injury work first?
So Bill's guilty of that offense.
I see,
yeah,
okay.
No, I left first and went up to the Okanagan and was still doing defense work, but slowly started to do more and more plaintiff's work, and it just suited who I am, and I really enjoyed representing people who were victims, and it just suited my sort of outlook much better.
I've asked Scott this question before, and I'm happy to have another person to ask the same question of who has the same background. Does knowing the mindset of the insurance industry and having advocated on their behalf in the past and knowing their playbook pretty well, is that an advantage to you now that you're on the other side of the courtroom working on the other table for the plaintiff?
I personally think it's a huge advantage to have worked for insurance companies, to particularly at a higher level, because you understand the strategies of insurance companies and you understand their fears.
Right.
You understand what motivates them towards getting a better resolution, and you understand where you need to go as a plaintiff's lawyer to maximize the recovery for your clients. You do understand their mindset so much better, having sat around tables and listened to strategy.
Sure, exactly. And Scott, I mean, we've had great discussions in previous gatherings here on the radio about insurance and how important it is. I mean, insurance is something that it's valuable for us to have, whether it's life insurance or car insurance. I mean, it's not a bad thing to have insurance. It's just trying to get a claim resolved that sometimes is more than a bit of a problem.
Well, none of us would want to live in a world that didn't have insurance.
Sure.
But the vehicles that distribute and make insurance available to us are companies, and they just don't have a soul. They don't have emotions. They're basically just profit-driven because that's the way they're constructed. Mm-hmm. They're not benevolent organizations. They're not evil organizations. They just try to maximize profit. And when you've dealt with them, representing them for many years, you get to understand how it is they work, where the soft spots of the insurance companies are. You just learn how to navigate through the system a little bit easier.
Sure. Now, Joe Murphy and Joe Battista founded Murphy Battista back in the 80s specifically to do personal injury law right from the get-go. What drew you, Scott, because you joined the firm before Bill, who's just the newest guy. He's only been there a few weeks. What drew you to Murphy Battista specifically?
Well, as I said, Bill and I were partners at this other firm along with Alex Sund-Wittgenstein, another fellow who's now with us at Murphy Battista.
Okay.
And when Bill left, it really changed the landscape for myself. You lose a good friend, you lose a comrade, and you really start to rethink, do I want to do this work for the rest of my life? Bill had moved up to the Okanagan, was doing personal injury work, would report back about how much he really liked it. And then I decided, why not? Mm-hmm. And so I moved to Murphy Battista and haven't looked back.
Mm-hmm. And as so it was your transitioning, Bill, and recounting the experience and the very positive, because you were saying that when you guys used to go on your long walks while working for that corporate firm, contemplating how to change the world, improve your lives and your work circumstance, well, you had to change the type of work you were doing. That was step one, wasn't it, ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, it really is in terms of your overall happiness, in terms of your work. When I started to do more plaintiffs' personal injury and as a catalyst to change, that wasn't the reason why I was doing it. It's just that the firm that I was at in Okanagan did more of it. And as I experienced dealing with people, as opposed to corporations and people who didn't care, I realized how much in accordance with my own sort of general outlook that it just made me much happier. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you just one relatively quick story about my own experience, how ultimately I changed in terms of how I saw doing my work. This was when I moved up to the Okanagan and had a young guy who was brain injured, and he lived in Pembroke, Ontario. And
near Ottawa.
Near Ottawa.
Right.
And he and his pregnant wife came out to do a liability trial. We did a mediation first. It was completely unsuccessful. An
attempt to negotiate before going to court with the insurance company.
With the insurance company. The big issue was liability, and the corporation was taking a very strong position on liability that they didn't have to pay anything.
Okay.
So this young couple, one brain-injured young man and his lovely wife who's pregnant, were having to be in Vernon for about 10 days during this liability trial. And I remember looking at them. We were in Vancouver at the mediation, and I could tell they were just terrified.
Right.
Terrified to be doing this trial. They were out of their depths, out of their elements. And so I made a phone call to my wife, and I said, I'm bringing some people home with me. I'm not putting these people up in a hotel. They're going to stay with us, and they're going to be with us during this 10-day trial. And she's like, okay.
Right.
I hope they're really nice people. They're fantastic people.
Sure.
And so during the trial, they stayed at my house.
Wow.
They walked my kids to the bus stop. They got to know my family. And we got a really good result ultimately. But I just can't tell you how satisfying it was to have that relationship with these people.
Right.
And it just changed the way that I wanted to do work.
I want to just pick up on one thing Bill was saying with you, Scott, and that's the fear factor. When we get into these situations, when we are in an accident, when we're injured, when we have to interact with the insurance company, whether it's ICBC or Sun Life or whoever, suddenly we're instantly out of our depth, to use Bill's phrase. We're dealing with a monolithic corporation who has a battalion of lawyers at their beck and call, and here you are, one private banged-up person trying to get some satisfaction. Good luck with that. Well, people get freaked out.
They do. And in fact, the clients that aren't freaked out are the ones that you really have to check in with, because fear is natural. And the insurance companies, they really bank on fear. They bank on people not proceeding with their claims because of fear. And if you sit down and you explain it to a client what they're up against, they have a client that has, they're facing an opponent that has unlimited resources.
Right.
They get to pay their lawyers with money that they can write off. Your clients can't, right? They don't get to claim it as a business expense. They can wage wars of attrition that your clients can't even imagine. And it takes, I'm always...
Of course, delay. Just delay until you don't have any money left to fight them.
You really have
tremendous... I'm being a little cynical here, Scott, but that I think reflecting what a lot of people think about how they're handled, how the insurance industry handles people. And usually, if possible, beat them up financially. Delay, delay, and delay until they run out of money, and guess who wins?
Well, that's
Now,
definitely
is
a
that
strategy.
simplistic, or am I kind of onto something here?
Well, it's definitely a strategy because the insurance companies, the longer they hold on to the money, the more money they make. So that is definitely part of the business model. So that is part of it.
Okay.
But when Bill tells a story about his clients, to have the courage to face that insurance company down, to follow their lawyer's advice that no, I think we ought to go to trial. It's really amazing the amount of respect you have for your clients that can face those fears and challenge these big insurance companies in court.
Okay.
The fear is really on two levels. One is it's the fear of the unknown.
Well, sure.
Trial is a very adversarial process, so you're going to be cross-examined. Your integrity may be challenged. Your credibility may be challenged.
Absolutely.
So they've never done it. For people like Scott and I who go to trial quite often, our heart rates don't go up.
Right.
But for the clients who've never been part of this process, it's very, very intimidating. So part of the reason why I wanted these people in my house is to calm them down, to be able to talk to them every night, to be able to say, look, it's going to be okay.
Right.
You're going to just get up there and tell the truth and everything will be fine. The other fear that sometimes is if you lose on a liability trial, for example, you end up having to pay costs.
Mm-hmm.
So it can financially ruin people. So insurance companies will play on that fear. If you lose, you're going to lose your house or whatever it is that they're going to say. So it is it's a practical fear-driven reason too, but the fear of the unknown going into trial is oftentimes really quite palpable for people.
You talked specifically in the case of this young couple from Pembroke of a 10-day liability trial, Bill.
Yeah.
So what would the costs typically be for a 10-day trial?
Well, the costs, if they were paying you by the hour, would be prohibitively expensive.
Sure.
We have contingency fees now in the province of British Columbia, which really were designed to be able to help people get access to lawyers. So if they lose, they don't have to pay you any fees because it's on a contingency basis.
Right.
But they have to pay court costs on the other side.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
going
it could
for.
be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 that they'd end up having to pay. They have to pay the other side's experts, and it can be quite prohibitively expensive.
And the insurance company, Scott, plays on this, knowing that this could literally, a young couple with a baby on the way, the first child on the way, $25,000, $30,000 cash, it could ruin a couple like that.
Well, it can cause people to lose their homes.
Exactly.
And when you're at a mediation, and excuse me, it's either said expressly or impliedly that there's going to be a very harsh financial consequence to your client if they lose.
Right.
And we've all have stories where clients have had to contemplate those fears before making the difficult decision to proceed to trial.
Right. And does the insurance company, I don't know about the ethics of all of this, but how does the insurance company issue that threat? If you lose, you're going to get stuck for all of these costs, and it could cost you your house. Now, how do they say that legally, Bill, and still, no question, issue the threat?
Well, if you're in a mediation and it's all without prejudice, so it's never going to go see the light of day in a courtroom. But sometimes it's very expressively. It's just said, look, at the end of the day, this is an assessment of your risk, and let me lay out what your risk is for you. If you're on the defense side, and your risk for you is if you lose on liability, you're going to have to pay all of our court costs. Here's what I estimate them to be, and so you see the eyes of your clients get wider and wider and wider.
Well, yeah.
And during the break, they're going, I'm going to lose my house? Like,
right.
what does this all mean? And then you bring them back saying, okay, this is an assessment of risk, but I don't think it's a real risk. And you bring your clients back down to earth. But that's what a good defense counsel and insurance companies do. They scare you.
Right. And what typically, Scott, are people most afraid of? When they get into an accident and they get injured and they know something's wrong, it may never be right again, but even if it's curable or fixable, something's really wrong here. I need to do something about this, but oh man, it's weird and scary. What are they most afraid of?
I think they're most afraid of what sort of information the insurance company is going to dig up on them and how they're going to investigate them. And the reality of it is that most cases are relatively routine. The insurance companies aren't up to anything sinister. They're not evil. They're just there to adjust the claims. But a lot of people have fears, mostly unwarranted, that the insurance company is going to go start surveilling them, or talking to their neighbors.
Or digging up skeletons from their closets of weird descriptions.
Right, and these are people that don't really have any skeletons,
What?
but they just worry that their good name might be tarnished.
Right.
The reality of it is, insurance companies will use those strategies from time to time, but in my view, very infrequently.
Okay. Need to take a quick break. It's the Law Show on CIL 650. Our guests, lawyers from Murphy Battista, LLP, a Vancouver personal injury law firm. Delighted to have Scott Stanley and the new guy, Bill Dick from the Okanagan, with us on the program this morning. Lots more still ahead, and we're coming right back after this quick timeout.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CIL 650.